and thank you for joining again on another installment of Live in Five. We're back at the studio today, and as look as kind of NASA space station-esque as my studio is. I'm the one on the ground, but I looked into it, and there's a lot of cool news reports about the possibilities of being like a space tourist. Can you, would you like to be a space tourist? So Virgin Atlantic, Tesla, all the biggies, they've got these space ships that you could buy passage on, and you could do like space tourism. You could go up for a little bit of time or for a couple of days. Can you imagine going up and it reminds me of one of my favorite jokes. This joke actually is not too long ago. Before this thing was a reality, it was just a joke. Can you imagine? So the joke went that they were able to take a couple of travelers into the space station. They had to go around the world, and they invited some major religious leaders. They had a rabbi and a priest and an imam, and they went them up and took them around the world for a beautiful trip. And when they disembarked down on the land, back on planet Earth, on terra firma, there was a big crowd of reporters waiting to glean their first comments, thoughts, and experiences. So they went to the priest first, and they said, "How was it, Father? How was your experience?" And he said, "It was just absolutely heavenly. To look down on Earth as if all humanity at peace. Beautiful." They went next to the imam, and they said, "What was it like? Did you enjoy the experience?" He said, "It was heavenly to be so close to Allah, Heavenly Father, to be so close." And then they went to the rabbi. The rabbi came down from the space shuttle, disheveled. His yarmulke was askew, his tie was ajar, and he looked like a mess. And they said, "Rabbi, are you okay?" He said, "Oy vey." They said, "How was the experience?" He said, it was terrible. Around the world, the sun was rising, was setting, on with the tefillin, off with the tefillin, shachris mincha marav, Oy, this space travel, not for the Jews, That's what I think it'd be like. So, are we going to get a chance to go up into space? I can't even imagine how complicated that's going to be, So I guess we'll leave that for someone else. But if you want your opportunity, you too can train. I mean, I get a little like nauseous, on roller coaster rides. This is definitely not for this rabbi. That's for sure not. We're not doing any. Actually, not too long ago, I got really nauseous. I was nauseous for like a better part of a day. I went up for a plane ride with my number one son, Shia, the pilot, and he was visiting. And he needed to like log some hours. If you want to keep your recreational pilot's license current, you've got to fly regularly and log some hours. So he said, "Dad, you want to come along?" I was like, "Absolutely, let's go flying." So we went down to Centennial Airport. We got on one of those little planes. These are little planes. You know what I'm saying? And the instructor was in there. So okay, so I'm in the back, and it was at night. I have some great pictures, but I'll have to tell you, if I just thinking about it, my stomach turns upside down. So not only do they have to take off, land, but he's got to practice doing all these insane maneuvers. The plane was sideways. We were going, whoa, like this. And my stomach is I would say it's in my mouth, but I think it was outside the plane. And then then they do this thing where they like try to get the plane to stall, like on purpose. I mean, this is a purposeful thing. They fly like this, and it's a plane, so it can't do this. It's not a spaceship. So they go up like this, and they're hanging the plane like that until suddenly the sirens from the engine go off, like the engine just stalled, and we go whoomp, and then he's got to try to lift it up. Now that's like a safety technique every pilot has to know how to do, but you never want to experience that. Let me just tell you. Oh, was I sick? That was worse than any roller coaster ride I've ever done. And then there's another one that I kid you not, where they say, "Okay, we're going to turn the engine off, and we're going to see how you come to a crash land here." And the test, the coach, the pilot coach in the passenger seat, they turn the engine off. You're off. The engine is off. You're flying in this little plane, which is not as big as my car, and he turns the engine off. And suddenly we start like coasting down, and he's pretending what he's gonna do if the engine's out. And he says, "Okay, you see that field? We're gonna put in that field." And we get closer and closer, and I'm losing. And then suddenly, that last minute, I mean, literally, I could count the blades of grass. We're so close to the ground, and he turns the engine back on, and away we go. Talk about nervous and whatever. And that's what these pilots, more power to them. That's what even the recreational pilots, they got to know how to deal with this stuff. And Shaya, my son, trained for a short period of time in the Israeli Air Force, where they were teaching him aerial acrobatics in like these, he was getting ready to be a fighter pilot. So the only comment that the instructor had at the end of the flight was, "A little aggressive, don't you think?" And it's like, this is my kid, right? So, and I'm the one that's about to throw up in the back. Anyway, enough about that. But if anyone asks you if you'd like to go out for such a plane ride, think twice. Just learn from my experience. I don't know and what I know and what I know now, I'm not doing that again. So space flight, that's for the next rabbi. That's for the young rabbis. That's for the yeshiva students. They can do that. They can go into space. Rabbis in space. That's not going to be me. Okay, now back to today's agenda. I want to just point out, today is Rosh Chodesh Iyar, the first of the month of Iyar. Happy Rosh Chodesh to everyone. And this week's parsha is Tazria Mitzora. It's a double parsha this week. It's a double header. It's a big week for lots of reasons. Double header parsha. And before we get to that, I just want to mention, interestingly, also today in Jewish history, we have let me get the today in Jewish history board up here. It's kind of an interesting one. I was not aware of this, although it seems like something that maybe we would want to know. But today in Jewish history was a very meaningful date. It was the construction of the first temple in Jerusalem. So unbelievable thing. The first temple in Jerusalem, the construction started today. And that was the year 831 before the Common Era. So how long ago is that? Is that it's like 2,800 years ago? Pretty cool. 2,800 years ago, the first temple construction begins. Long time. That's a long time, right? 2,800 years ago. I just remembered that how old is America now again? Is it 1/10 of that old? Are we up to 280? I don't think we're up 280 yet. No, we're not that far. I remember the centennial was in my lifetime, 200. So we got to wait. We're not even 10% of that. 2,800 years ago. Unbelievable. Temple in Jerusalem, construction. That's King David and his son, King Solomon, his successor, would be the one to get to finish that. It's really an awesome thing. And it was today. And I just want to thank our Today in Jewish History sponsors for not having today's day in Jewish history be some country or other we got kicked out of and once upon a time. So now back with the rest of the next of the show. I do want to talk about these parshas that we have, because really these are very meaniful parshas. This is my favorite parsha. I'm not allowed to say that, and I say that every week, but this is my favorite parsha to teach, and it always will hold a special place in my heart, because this was the first parsha class that I taught. Now, I'll just tell you briefly the story, and then we'll get to it. The story was, I was a yeshiva student. I wasn't married yet, and I was in yeshiva in Jerusalem, and it was like summertime. So, there was a little bit of a break. There was kind of a summer break for a little bit in yeshiva, and there were still a lot of students in yeshiva, and the break really meant that the rabbis were not around, and there were still students in the yeshiva I was in. So they needed somebody to step in and to do I did both some trips for them. We did some trips around Israel, and as well, I taught a class or two. And the first class about a parsha I ever taught was this one. So this is like very special to me. Now, I took a look. They said, okay, you teach the parsha class this week. I said, really? Okay, I'll figure it out. I had to prepare, and I opened up I cracked open the books, and I looked up, and what is it? It's the parsha of leprosy. You could bet how excited I was. That was my first topic. They very exciting, and I was going to get to teach that. And so I thought, well, this is going to be a short class or a sleeper, one of the two or both. And yet what I found, and this is the coolest thing, I really found so many beautiful insights that it became one of my favorite parshas to teach forever. And it remains that to this very day. So let me take you through it a little bit, and I'll share a couple of the cool thoughts that I found in there, and you'll see if you agree with me. There's a lot there. Okay, so when we talk about, I mentioned the word leprosy. It's really not leprosy, but it sounds a lot like it. The Torah in this week's parsha talks about these very odd skin afflictions that the Jewish people used to have, and there's a big debate through the centuries if this has anything to do with leprosy whatsoever, and probably not, and you'll see why. It does have to do with, a whitening of the skin, and the way that we deal with it is we take on a bit of quarantine. Okay, so again, it sounds like it might have some similarity, but you'll understand how very little similarity it does when I tell you that it also attacks not only the skin but also clothing and even the walls of your house. Now, I don't know about any medical leprosy that has anything to do with that. And also, you didn't take it to a doctor. You used to take it to a Kohen, and there's such a thing as a doctor. The Torah talks about, when a person gets sick, you go see a doctor. We have, the Torah talks about doctors. But this is not a doctor issue. This is a Kohen issue. Why would you take it to a Kohen? A Kohen is more of a spiritual authority. And the answer really is that this is a much more of a spiritual affliction, a spiritual malady. And in fact, the Jewish people don't really have this anymore. It doesn't, not only Jewish people, it doesn't exist anywhere else. We don't have this. It doesn't happen. But in the same way that prophecy was a great spiritual reality that we used to have and don't have anymore, so too this. This was a spiritual thing that the Jewish people used to experience, but are no longer experiencing. And it was a kind of a spiritual affliction, and the Torah talks about it in quite a bit of detail, what it looked like and what it didn't look like, and the Kohen would have to see it and make his judgment call. Is it okay? Is it not okay? And the person would have to go into kind of a quarantine for a while and be out by themselves outside the camp, away from other people for a while. And then after it was done, they would come back to the Kohen, and he would say, "Okay, looks better. Come back home. But first, you have to go to the temple, and you have to bring a certain offering or two, and you have to conclude your process." And this conversation is like there's like 2 parshas worth of it. It's a lot of ink, a lot of ink in the Torah about it, and it sounds very esoteric, foreign, weird, I'm sure the bar mitzvah kid that this is his bar mitzvah parsha is thinking like, really? That's my bar mitzvah parsha? I got to talk about this, get up there and start talking about skin afflictions. It's just it doesn't really make for that bar mitzvah speech of your lifetime, so if this is your bar mitzvah, but what I found out is it is very meaningful. Let me try to explain why. So when I say that this is like a spiritual affliction, what do I mean by that? What does that mean? Is it mean just like heebie-jeebies, or it's magic, or what do we mean by that? It's non-physical. So we mean a couple things. Number one is we mean that it doesn't follow the laws of physical afflictions of the skin, health issues. It's not a physical malady. It doesn't follow those rules. It follows a different set of rules, the rules governed by the Torah, the rules described by the Torah. It's a little bit like last week we talked about the rules of kosher food. The nutritionists of your physical health may tell you to eat one way, but the spiritual advisors will tell you to eat kosher food, which follows a different set of rules, right? It could be that they'll tell you that some things that are deemed as kosher are not good for your body. I know what you're thinking, cholent, but it's not true. Cholent is good for your physical body too. It's very good for your cholesterol, cholent, but it's very good when it's kosher. Cholent is very good for your soul. And kosher food follows the rules of spiritual nutrition. It's good for your spirit. So to here, there are rules governing it that are spiritual rules. And for example, it means like this: where does it come from? Where do you catch one of these? What happens that causes one of these spiritual skin afflictions that the Parsha is talking about? So the beautiful explanations of our sages are that a person would be visited by one of these afflictions because he or she had a spiritual malady. For example, let's say that they were real habitual speakers of lashon hara. That's a spiritual problem. Someone who slanders and gossips as a sport, as a favorite pastime. Like, this is my, you ask me what I do for a hobby. I gossip, and we gossip for sport. That's a problem. That's a spiritual illness. And such a person would be visited by one of these skin afflictions. God would send it to them. Why? It's like a spiritual wake-up call, It's like God's way of writing you a ticket if you're speeding, which is a problem, so the cop pulls you over and writes you a ticket and says, drive more carefully. So God says, I'm going to stop you in your tracks. I'm going to give you a ticket, and you're going to get this mark, and the Kohen's going to see it. He's going to say, buddy, what's with you? Go outside the camp. You're in quarantine for a week. Come back and see me after a week by yourself outside the camp. When maybe you've learned, think about it, all by yourself outside the camp, before your cell phone. You really could be thoughtful out there, and you could meditate on what it means to live in polite society, and how not to do that, and how not to destroy your relationships with gossip and slander. Go out there and think about it. Come back and talk to me. It's a spiritual rooted cause. It's a malady of the spirit. And God would send this spiritual skin affliction so we could all see it. And so, the person could see it, and they would get the message. It was a strong message. It's like getting a ticket. And you know what? Nobody likes getting a speeding ticket. I believe you me, I've got my fair share. I'm a bit of a lead foot, a little fun fact about me. But I've got my fair share of speeding tickets in the day, and nobody likes it. But you know what? It's good for me. It's good for me. It teaches you to slow down. Speeding is dangerous. It's bad for, it's bad for everybody. And you should slow down. I should slow down. So therefore, in the day, we would get a ticket. You don't like it. It's not pleasant. But you know what? It's good for you. What's another spiritual cause? Another spiritual cause, say our sages, is stinginess. Someone who's stingy. What does that mean, stingy? Stingy is a concept that means that they are, rather interested in that their belongings are really only for themselves. They're not interested in sharing, giving, no tzedakah, no lending. I'm not doing anything for you. I'm stingy. This is for me and me only. And that is another spiritual malady. In fact, the way that you say stinginess in Hebrew is tsaras ayin, like you're narrow-eyed. And the word narrow, tsar, sounds like tsaras, tsara, like tsuris. That's the name for the thing on the skin, the tsaras. Narrow-eyed, stingy. So listen to this. So our sages point out that as I mentioned before, sometimes these afflictions would not be on the skin. They could be on the clothing. And it could be on a person's house. It could be on the walls of the house. Now, Imagine that, right? It's like the Amityville horror. You look over the wall and suddenly there's this growing big stain on the wall, and you know what that looks like. So you have to call Mr. Cohen over, and Mr. Cohen is gonna come and rule. Is gonna give you a ruling. Is that okay, or is it saras, or is it a problem? Now, here's the bad news. The bad news is that if Mr. Cohen comes over and finds that is a problematic spot, according to the Parsha, then everything in your house is going to be impurified, and you may even have to take the wall down or the house down. Can you imagine that? So how do you prevent all your property and your possessions from being rendered invalid by that? So the first thing you do is, before you invite Mr. Cohen over, is you empty the house. You take everything out, get it out in the front yard, then invite him over. It's going to save you from impurifying everything in the house. And so Mr. Stingy, everybody said, can they borrow your lawnmower? And he said, I don't have a lawnmower. Can I borrow your high chair? I don't have one of those. Now you're forced to put it out on the front lawn for all to see. And before Mr. Cohen comes over. And that's what we call measure for measure, That's the way that we handle that. So, and if it was really truly one of those guys, one of those people suffering from that spiritual malady of serious stinginess, so then they might have to, take the house down, take the wall down, start again. It'll cost you a couple of bucks. And the idea is, back in the day, is that, Hashem, God Almighty, is looking out for us and is gives us warning signs. Frankly, the fact that we don't have those warning signs anymore it's easier, but it's not better, because in a certain sense, it means like we're on autopilot. God says, you know what, go for it. I'm not even going to stop you. Go play in the street. I'm not going to say anything. That's not a good thing. The fact that we don't have this anymore is a sign of our distance from our Father in heaven, who's willing to give us a patch on the back of the hand when we deserve it, when we need it, and the fact that we're a little bit separated and distinct from that is not a good thing. It means we're flying on autopilot. And even though sometimes, when the pilot is flying helter skelter, it's uncomfortable, but it's better. It's better to have a pilot at the wheel. Better to have a wake-up call. Better to get a speeding ticket, And the fact that we don't have that anymore is a bit of a shame. So we read through the Parsha, and there's all these interesting ideas like that, and they really allude to the sort of lessons of character, And we that's something we've been talking about the last week or two, because at the end of the day, these special weeks between Passover and Shavuos, these are a time which is like earmarked for thinking about and working on our character and trying to be a mensch. Try to be, not to gossip about other people. Try not to be stingy, to be, compassionate, to be thoughtful, to think about other people. So now that leads me to a little bit to the next topic of the day. I wanted to talk about the Midah of the week. Okay. The Midah of the week. Midah means the trait. And we introduced it just yesterday at the end of yesterday's live at 5. The trait, so this is in our 7-week count, right? This is the beginning of week number 3. I still have a paper clip in the book from last year, but I got to move it. We're week 3. Today is day 16. So if you haven't yet counted the Omer, you can repeat after me. Today is 16 days, which are 2 weeks and 2 days of the Omer. That's your Omer count for today. Today you counted the Omer. Now 16 days, which are 2 weeks and 2 days of the Omer. And the trait of the week of week 3, because we're 2 days into 2 days past 2 weeks, we're 2 days into week 3. So the trait that we mentioned yesterday is Tiferes. Tiferes. And what that means is the beautiful, compassionate blend of discipline and of love. And we translate that compassion. I read a little bit, I think it was yesterday, and if you're interested, I'm looking in this beautiful book Rabbi Simon Jacobson's beautiful book on the Omer, and I read a little about it. We're talking about compassion, the trait of harmony, of truth. That's something we want to work on. It's a blend. It's a harmonious blend of the traits of week 1 and week 2. We're in week 3. It's a synthesis. It's a blend, and that is something that we want to try to use this time to think about. So let me give you a couple of thoughts from Rabbi Jacobson on today's trait of the week, specifically today. So it is this trait of compassion. So here's what to think about. For compassion to be effective and healthy, it needs to be disciplined and focused, okay? Discretion, okay? And you have to know when to apply compassion. Now, if you're a judge, for example, okay, you're a judge. So you're typically in charge of sentencing. So let's say somebody was brought as a criminal and they were accused and they were convicted. Now comes time for sentencing. And then you're the judge. And the judge can do one of two things. The judge can say, well, look, if we look at the statutes for the crime that you did, here is the relevant punishment that's associated with that. We're going to fine you. Or you could say, look, you're a good guy. You didn't mean it. It's your first time. And we're going to be compassionate with you. And we're going to let you off with just a warning this time, And those are the two possibilities. You're gonna get the just deserts of your crime, or we're gonna be compassionate. And you're the judge, and you have to decide when are you gonna apply that compassion. Now, maybe you're a judge and maybe you're not a judge, but you know what? In life, we interact with other people, and we are in that position sometimes where we have to decide: can I give this guy a break, or do I have to kind of hold him to it? Maybe you're a supervisor. Maybe this is your neighbor. Maybe it's your kid. Maybe it's, somebody who is now you have to make a judgment call. Well, so do I have to, kind of maintain my expectations here and they fell short? Or do I have to say, look, you know what? We'll give you a break. We're going to give you compassion. And that is the trait of today and the trait of the week. It's an admixture. It's a blend. It's the harmonious blend of both of those two things. You have to know when to apply it. Sometimes it's the right thing to demand justice. Sometimes it's the right thing to be compassionate. Now, let me give you another example. When let's say you're in a conversation with somebody and they say something that's, it's just inappropriate. It's a little bit offensive. Okay. And you feel offended. Now you are in one of those moments where you have to decide, am I going to say, hey, you know what? I didn't like that comment so much and I'd like an apology, please. Or are you going to say to yourself, you know what? I'm going to let it go. I'm going to forget about it. This is just not worth my time. It's not a big deal. Forget about it. And I'm going to just really let it go and move on and never think about it again. And you have to decide. And sometimes, sometimes one is right. Sometimes the other is right. Maybe this is something that you shouldn't let go. Maybe this is a repeated offender, or it's something that you just really don't want to have to live with. And you should speak up. There's a job in college campuses. It's called the ombudsman. The ombudsman is like the clerk of kvetching. And whenever anybody has a kvetch on a college campus, you go see that person and you register your kvetch. And I guess that the ombudsman sort of sorts it out. Sometimes it's important. We have to take care of the issue. Sometimes the answer is, I think you just need to deal, and it depends. And you are the judge. And that's the trait of Tiferes, which is to judge, which is to know how to apply. Do I demand an apology or do I forget all about it? Do I apply my compassion or to apply my desire to see justice and truth applied? That's something to think about for today. The meat of the week, Tiferes, week 3 on our way to Shavuos, folks. And that's our show for today. It is always a delight to have you in the studio with me for Live at 5. If you're watching on Facebook and you want to join us Monday through Thursday, 5 p.m. at Zoom meeting ID 694-3470. three, something like that. You know the number. Look it up. Anyway, have a wonderful rest of your day, a healthy and a holy, and we'll see you tomorrow on Live at 5.